Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 13 of the anime series Brynhildr in the Darkness. For all intents and purposes, the series finale, and this was a hell of a finale. I mean, it was packed to the rafters with action and suspense. Loved every single minute of it. Essentially, we're picking up right where we left off, with Kotori having been well and truly captured and taken away by Ichijiku and Valkyria, respectively. She is emanating the power to reset the world, essentially reformat the entire Earth. All life on Earth will be wiped out if it concludes. And we see in the early going that she's deciding to basically, pop her honest. She's going to sacrifice herself because of all those joyous, happy days she was able to have, as well as, saving whole life on Earth. That's a big deal to her, too. But, I mean, she's really looking internally at the few happy days she had with the other witches and everything like that. And it's really heartening, that moment, because we actually see in this series there are consequences to the actions going on, unlike some other series in this particular season. But essentially we see that Ryota, Kuroha, and Kazumi, respectively, are going to be going on their own to face off against Ichijiku and Valkyria. And I love that there's this little twist we see where Kazumi and Kuroha actually had it planned to knock Ryota out, essentially, kind of returning the favor for all the times he's saved them in the past, and he's been willing to risk his life. They don't want to see him do that again, especially unnecessarily with the just sheer force and power that Valkyria represents. So they knock him out with a couple of 2x4s and make off for where basically they're holding Kotori to try to save her. And of course, this is a lost cause to a degree because she does end up sacrificing herself. But I love that Ryota, once he comes to, he is right on their coattails anyway. He doesn't care. He's going to do whatever he can. And what's really awesome is he is, as we saw briefly in the previous episode, he's kind of being led by the ghostly representation of Nanami, the witch who I was sad to see go after she had just been able to experience a few days of happiness as well, being free from the lab and everything. And it's almost akin to Man of Steel, Superman's father, Jor-El, leading Lois Lane out of a ship and everything. That's very much what we have Nanami doing for Ryota, trying to lead him in the right direction. And he's the one who encounters, essentially, Kotori in her dying moments, where we see that the whole sort of instigation for all of this, Ichijiku, what he was trying to do with Kotori specifically, trying to sort of rebirth the mind of his sister, his little sister, we see that this actually did take effect. But, of course, Nanami, in her spirit form, asks the question we're all thinking, well, when did that actually happen? Has it been all along? Could it have been his little sister's consciousness, ever since we first met Kotori, or was it only in these dying moments? Remains debatable, but it is no less heartening when we see that, in those final moments there are two souls dying, not just one. And of course we have Ryota finding Kazumi, who we presume to be basically taken out for the count by Valkyria when she and Kuroha had a confrontation with them as they're pretty much leaving, ticked off that Kotori did this. And essentially we have Valkyria taking Kuroha because, as she puts it, finally we have the revelation. Yes, as I much speculated, they are familial. They are sisters. Apparently Kuroha is Valkyria's little sister, and so she doesn't want to have to kill her, no matter how much that Stockholm Syndrome effect, which we get a little more play on in this episode, exactly what happens. Essentially, Ichijiku went into this locked-off room that was full of radiation and stuff and tried to prompt Valkyria to live or what have you, and so she fell in love with him. And so she's basically dripping on his every order, no matter what. I mean, even killing her own sister, she decides if it means making him happy, I will do it. And so I love at that point we basically have Ryota coming in, literally kung fu style, action hero style, kicking Ichijiku in the head, knocking him away from Kuroha when he's going to try to kill her. And this is where the big throwdown happens. Now, interspersed alongside this, we see that Kana has basically, there's like a shadow figure that seems to overhang her when she's seeing her visions of who's going to live and who's going to die, and she's calling out their names, screaming them because she wants to be able to do something. We got in the early going of the series a little hint that she can actually move if she so wanted to, and we find out in this episode that's absolutely true. The sacrifice she makes for her ability is immobility, not being able to move, but if she pops her harness, she actually has full range of motion, and she'll lose essentially those visions visions, the capability of seeing who's going to live and die next and all that stuff. And she comes to the rescue, much as the cavalry, while Ryota and Kuroha are being kept at bay by Valkyria. And this is where all hell breaks loose. Essentially, you have, with the revelation that Nanami was able to share through Ryota in a previous episode, Kuroha knows that she has an ultimate power which involves popping her honest, and she does so. And she becomes like uber powerful, to match, if not even go beyond the powers Valkyria, her older sister, has. And here we see all of her memories come flooding back, and it's just incredible to me because, of course, she walks up to Ryota, kisses him, is like, I've been wanting to do this for the longest time. I finally remember all of our lives, our adventures as children, everything that we've done up to now, and, I love you. She basically professes to him. And it's basically incredible because as we see, the group Hexenjog ends up basically destroying, just putting hundreds and hundreds of bullets into Ichijiku. He decides at the last moment he actually does care for someone other than himself or his sister. He gets in the way as they're trying to kill Valkyria, and he's taken out. So Valkyria is ready to just unleash hell on the world, destroy the planet, all life on it, and everything like that. She's definitely peaked, essentially the psychosis. And so the transformation happens as Valkyria is sort of floating in the air like Supergirl or something like that, summoning a ball of antimatter as we saw her do in a previous episode. Here Kuroha has a plan in motion that she's going to basically open a black frickin' hole, a mini black hole, to suck in this explosion, and this is what happens. This actually works. It's just astounding to me, this whole sequence as it plays out. It looked like she had actually knocked herself out as she was falling, but she was floating back to the planet, and Ryota comes running up to her asking if she's okay, and suddenly she's like, who are you? So essentially, the tremendous use of the power, we see the price that she has to pay. In effect, once again, she lost her memories, and we're pretty much back to square one with her character, but it wasn't upsetting to me because all the rest of the characters, there was still a cost with everything that was going on. There were still casualties that, characters who died and stayed dead. There was a price that was paid to save the day in the end. And as we see toward the end of this series, very surprisingly, Kazumi actually survives. We see Kana survived. Kuroha, of course. Hatsuna was a nice surprise to see that she was able to heal after the last wound she was basically inflicted by and everything. And so in a sense, as much of the band is back together as is possible as the series ends, and at least for the moment the threat has been quelled, there is still a lab. There are still witches probably that have been tested on and are being held captive. There is the potential for, a continuation of the story down the line, but for the moment this is a nice end cap, and it's even that much better because Kogoro, the scientist Ryota had enlisted to try to find a way to create those death suppressant pills to prolong the lives of these witches, actually had, as he says in this episode, a tremendous amount of progress where essentially he, if he's leaving Ryota a message saying, bring the witches down here, we got this working for you, that says to me that they're going to live indefinitely now if they so choose, and happily if they so choose, and that's awesome. Of course, it was heartbreaking to see some of the witches who lost their lives along the way, not just within this episode, but through the course of the series. These innocent girls who were being, forcibly tested on and subjected to experimentation under captivity and what essentially amounts to slavery and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really awesome in the end to see this little group, Ryota, Kuroha, Kana, Kazumi, and Hatsuna still being alive and well. Kogoro's promised that their lives are going to be well and truly safe and prolonged at this point. And even if Kuroha's going to have to go through the motions again and try to learn everything anew, at least she has that ability until the next threat comes along, So, this series definitely had its ups and downs for me, but it totally took a swing back for the awesome in the last couple of episodes of the series. And so, yeah, the series on whole was a memorable experience that I'll look back on more fondly than not. And otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. So, I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.